Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
You got Luke.
Luke, could you tell me, how does deep sea drilling work?
You know what, James? This was one that is not magic.
It's not?
Apparently, you just drill holes.
Well, that was easy.
I think
hopefully everybody learned something here today.
Well,
if you'd like to...
keep in mind, folks, you have to do this through, in some cases, thousands of feet of water and then thousands of feet of the earth. So it might be a little more complicated than I just said, but if you're looking for the cliff notes, you drill
Which
holes.
I am. That's right. You drill holes.
That's it.
So the first thing I wanted to mention is that offshore oil rigs are super expensive. Like
It's
super
crazy.
mega, like maybe even more than podcast money expensive.
Close.
Yeah.
It's very close.
Investing in them has become a thing like over the past 50 or so years. And because much like offshore rigs, oil is super expensive, or at least it was for quite a while. And this outrageous like cost price per barrel of oil has made it what's at least somewhat feasible to build these giant structures and access this oil that's down there in the ocean, right?
The interesting thing, you talk about that feasibility, there's this curve, right? And this curve is the price per barrel. And that price per barrel, or I'm sorry, production. So how much it costs to produce a barrel of oil. And if you're basically on ground, you basically dig a hole, you get one of those seesaw pumps and you get oil. It's pretty easy to do.
It is so easy.
The minute you have to build like $1 billion floating city, man it with people, send helicopters to get people back and forth and supplies and pump oil and all the infrastructure, that cost. So I was just reading somewhere where it said, like, right now, the oil that's coming off of the deep sea wells, they're losing money on that oil.
Oh yeah.
They're making so much on the stuff they make, and through traditional means, because it's a lot easier. But it's so that's why you see like sometimes these rigs shut down for months and months and months, because it's just way too expensive to produce. And sometimes their capacity kicks up again because the price of oil has increased. So it's interesting that they're making oil, they're losing money, but they're making so much on the other stuff they produce. It's worth doing it. So kind of crazy.
It is. Fun fact for you, Luke.
Shoot.
The first of these platforms was constructed way back in 1897 at the end of a wharf in California. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So of course,
1897?
Yeah.
Is that when it was?
That's what I have it as.
History? Yeah, I got 1896, so we're close
enough. Now we're really splitting hairs. All right, well, all of our fact checkers, you check it out for us and let us know.
So another milestone, another fun fact milestone, the first like out of distance. So like there was always this fear, like when I was doing the research, like they always did it so you could see the land.
Okay.
So apparently like the Gulf of Mexico, like you can be out like a mile and it's like 20 feet deep. I didn't realize that. And there's
Is that so?
Well, I don't know in all areas, but like in a lot of cases, they're like miles off and they're only like 20, 30 feet of water. But the first one that was ever out of sight of land was in 1947. And this was 10.5 miles off the coast of Louisiana. And this was when Kerr-McGee Oil Industries put the first... Yeah, of course, everybody knows those folks. The first productive well that was beyond the sight of land. There were a lot of ones that were out further, but they weren't productive because they had no way of really knowing. There wasn't a lot of like geology and surveying that was happening before then. It was kind of guessing. So
interesting. We joke about like everybody knows them, but people in Louisiana are probably like, well, yeah, everybody does know who they are. Okay, so before you go and construct one of these giant things, you actually have to know where to build it. That's a good start. Now, usually they're kind of built in clusters, right? Or at least generally the same location of clusters, like the Persian Gulf, the Gulf Coast, up in the north above Scotland, those kind of areas.
The North Sea, I believe it's called.
The North Sea. Look at you, Mr. Geography? That's the
Close
one.
enough.
Geography. But you actually have to also know the best place that you're going to drop these suckers within that cluster, right? And to do that, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on, like using satellites or ships to bounce like some sonar stuff off to try and figure out where the oil is located. Um, I think we went into pretty good detail on that in our natural gas and oil episode. So go check that one out if you really want to get into the details of how they find the perfect spot. But
The
once, oh, go ahead.
the one that I didn't remember when we covered oil and natural gas was
Mm-hmm.
apparently there's these things called salt domes. Did you
Salt
see that?
domes. I did
Yeah,
not.
so apparently there's this formation of salt that creates a dome like under
I
the
figured
crust
that
of the
out.
bottom of the sea. And apparently that's an indicator that you're going to find oil there. So apparently they can do some relatively shallow testing and drilling in locations. It doesn't require the big, huge, rig to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And if they locate these salt domes, that's usually a good indicator that there's going
That's
to be oil close
interesting.
by.
I feel like it's cheating, but that's very
A little bit.
interesting.
I just assumed that you remember the thing. Did you ever see the thing to find
Yeah, the
water?
sticks. Yeah, those
I assume
sticks.
they have something like that for oil. You just put these two sticks, and whenever you
What were they,
walk,
divining rods or something like
I
that?
think that's what they're called.
Yeah, I remember. See, we went on the same like school tour of Oil City, so we know all of this
We
stuff.
did Drake's Well.
Drake's Well, that's right. Fun fact, I
Shoot.
did not realize this. I don't know why I didn't, but once the oil companies actually find this spot, either with the big old mound of salt or whatever, in the undersea oil deposit, they actually have to obtain drilling rights because most of the coast and the ocean belongs to like states or countries. And so companies actually have to lease the area that they want from whatever government owns that area.
You
So,
ready, James?
oh, I'm ready.
A little history for you. I know you like your
Uh-oh. I
history.
love
In
history.
1953, there were two landmark bills that passed. The first one was the Submerged Land Act, and this gave most states, and if you think about the states, this is like California, maybe Alaska, the Gulf, obviously. So it gives them 3 nautical miles off the coast. And I don't know what the difference is between a nautical mile and a
I don't
regular
either.
mile. Maybe one of our listeners knows the difference. And it allows states, it allows the state of Florida and the state of Texas to claim 9 miles of jurisdiction. The second law was the Outer Continental Shelf Land Act, and this gave the federal government the authority to issue leases beyond the state's jurisdiction. So now the government can actually administer those properties that are out. So basically, first 2 miles, the states get it, 2 and then out, the federal government is allowed to do that.
Oh, interesting. Do you think they could sell me that land? If I was like, what I want is 2 miles of ocean.
That's all I want.
Yeah. That's interesting. So once these things are set up, the giant oil rigs, they're pretty self-sufficient and they pretty much don't move. Like they stay in their spot for a very, very long time. Now there's different types of them. Some might be easier to move than others, but they stay there for a long time. They're so self-sufficient though, which I found interesting. They actually produce their own water and electricity to save on costs. So like you said, you're basically building a giant floating city, right?
Mhm.
And that's exactly what's going on there. So the wells, of course, I mean, if you have anything else to add, let me know. I was going to get into the drilling part a little bit.
So I want to do a little bit on like the preparation that happens to locate it. So obviously there's all this, seismology, aerial stuff that they do, but most of the money that goes into deep sea drill, and when I say deep sea, I mean kind of anything offshore. So they have something called shallow, which is up to 500 feet.
Okay.
Like 500 to 1,000 is considered deep, and then super deep is like 5,000 feet and above.
Did I name that one like super deep?
That's what I would call it.
That's what I would call it.
Way deep. So, so the most of the money that like BP or Shell or whoever these big, huge multinational organizations, most of the money they spend is actually on locating, because to your point, you talked about all those different locations. Like once you like find a spot, if it doesn't work out, it costs you millions and millions of dollars to check out another spot. So so the preparation before they even drill for oil. So like all the steps that are necessary to drill a well happen each and every time they find a location. So all the stuff that you're going to go through for the drilling process, that happens during the location process. Then if it is a feasible well, then they actually, pump the oil out or whatever they have to
Right.
do. So just keep that in mind. It isn't like they get there and they like scratch the surface. Like all the preparation for drilling has to occur at every single spot to see if it's feasible. And then if it is, great, they cap it off and then maybe wait till they need it. Or if it's not, they just move on and hopefully find another spot close by. So
yeah, turns out that oil isn't real close to the surface, so makes it a little difficult. So before we get into the drilling process, let's take a break for a word from our sponsor.
We don't have a sponsor today, James.
We actually do have a sponsor this week,
Luke. Goodness gracious. Let's hear it.
What can computational science tell us about the tsunami generated by the biggest earthquake to ever hit Europe? Before you know it, everything is shaking, and shaking loudly. What makes the coronavirus so contagious?
It's the machine that literally will latch on to your human cell and ultimately infect you.
And what was it like when a massive act of cyber warfare stopped an entire country in its tracks? Their ATM greets you with red text over a black screen. This is really starting to creep you out. These are just some of the questions being answered every day through the power of computing. And on season 2 of the Big Compute podcast, we transport you to the heart of these stories, giving you a first-hand look at how computational science is changing our world. Find the Big Compute podcast wherever you get your audio, or visit bigcompute.org.
All right. So, in addition to some sponsors, gosh, I feel so bad if we don't give some shout outs. So I'm going to give a couple of them quickly, right? Tim J wrote in and says, I had a career shift from building live event scenery and effects to construction material testing and research. So that's a pretty big shift in my opinion. I constantly feel like an imposter among engineers. I appreciate your podcast a lot. You two tackle great subjects and complement each other's styles very well. Little does he know we hate each other in the background. Says, thank you for keeping an open seat at the table for curious minds. I like that. I feel like that really sums it up nicely. So also, don't feel like an imposter amongst engineers.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I said in the email back, I know we're all grumpy and standoffish, but that's just, that's an us problem, not a you problem. So
I've pretty much been an imposter my entire life, James.
Yeah, so. No doubt. Second shout out, Zach V is actually in the middle of a cross-country move and just found our podcast, so has been just burning through the episodes because,
has to be the best trip ever.
I would imagine he might actually go back across and back again just to listen to the rest of them, I assume. Going through some episodes of your show has helped me rekindle some of the excitement I had for engineering in college. As a mechanical engineer, hooray, but hasn't done much engineering, much like us, over the past 5 years because unlike us, he spent time as an officer in the Coast Guard. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, but now he's moving on to project management, just like my boy Clark does. So
there you go.
Nothing like babysitting people on meetings. So good luck with that. If any of you would like a shout out, if you have a topic for us to cover, if you want to sponsor us with big money, anything like that, email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
And don't forget to subscribe, like, share, review, and as always, you can tell your smart devices to play the Unprofessional Engineering podcast.
That is right. All right, so let's drill for some oil, Luke.
Let's do it.
The wells need a drilling rig.
They do.
This is either like a drill ship that can be sent out there, a semi-submersible vessel, or a floating platform, which is kind of what I always have in mind whenever I think about this process, is this floating platform. Each option has a hoisting system, which obviously you need one of those, that can raise and lower drill pipes. Drill pipes I saw are not that long. I mean, they're big and heavy, and I think they're like in 30-foot segments. So you get these giant pipes, but they're all just connected together, kind of like Lincoln logs or something. They also include a BOP stack, also known as a blowout preventer. I can't imagine why the marketing department doesn't want to walk around saying blowout preventer all the time, but I appreciate
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Those are those. So essentially, folks, that is the equivalent of like a pressure relief valve, and this is typically on the ocean floor.
Yep.
As the like, so that's where that when you say the well is there, the well is actually on the ocean floor, and that's where that BOP is.
Yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, it's just kind of like doing it on ground. You just have all the extra hassle of the water that you're dealing with, right?
Yeah. And
I mean,
pressure.
the process is different,
Yeah,
but
and the
if you
pressure's
think about the
pretty
well
crazy.
being on the ground, right? So to make all of these holes that they're going to be making, granted, for one, they're just hopefully making one, they have a drill bit, just like if you're using a drill at home, right?
Mhm.
Except instead of that cute little metal drill thing that you have at home, the drill bit that they use is this giant, like multi-headed, like grindy looking thing. If you ever look at those big tunnel grinders that they do for like trains or subways or whatever, that's what it kind of looks like. Is it has these but like multiple heads on it, just smashing stuff up. Really scary looking, and it looks like it's probably rather expensive as well. The first step in this grinding drilling process is called spudding in. I like that word, spudding.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And then again, since the ground on the ocean floor, it turns out it's a little bit soft, it's kind of sandy, loose, soily kind of stuff there in the first layers. A base pipe is installed to keep the well walls from collapsing in on themselves. Makes sense. The base pipe is assembled at the rig floor, and the drill is then stuffed into it. So think of it like the big drill is being sent down through a hollow pipe.
Yeah, there's a sleeve
like
the whole way down. Yeah,
exactly. And then the assembly is sent to the seafloor, drills into the ground where the pump is turned on, and that's what shoots out any water or other crap that you don't want in your hollow pipe. Once the base pipe, so I guess, do you have anything else to add on there before I go into?
Are you going to get to the mud and the concrete?
Oh yeah, I'm going to get to the mud and the concrete.
Which I pumping that stuff down
in
bananas.
I know, it's so strange. So once the base pipe and the well heads are at the right height, the drill bit will continue down on its own, rah, 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 into the ground. That's the noise it makes if you haven't ever been on a rig like Luke and I have regularly. So while this is happening, they pump, like Luke was talking about, mud into this hole, which fills it up. This is kind of ingenious, right? It fills it up and lifts out all the rock cuttings and stuff like that from the well, and keeps it cool. It keeps it cool, and it fills the well with fluid to equalize the pressure, like you were talking about.
Correct.
And keeps other fluids from flowing into it. So pretty creative solution. For all of you worried about us pumping this gross mud into places, don't worry. It's environmentally friendly, and it's made up of like a mixture of clay and then like really finely ground rocks, and then like barite, which I don't know what that is, but barite to make it heavier. But it's all natural, so no badness going into the environment. All natural, just like Luke. Once we're, is that inappropriate? I don't even know.
It is inappropriate.
Once we're at the depth that we want this thing to be at, the casing pipe is put together, and I think this is like those 30-foot segments as well. Cement and mud is then pumped into the inside to hold everything in place. So I guess they're cementing it in place as well, right? To seal it off and hold it?
So what happens is, so imagine you have a tube within a tube. Okay, so you got two tubes.
Two tubes.
And so that means you have a donut where there's a free open area.
Makes sense.
The drill goes through the center, and then what it does is it fills it with concrete, puts a plug layer on, then pushes mud down. And what happens is the mud pushes that plug, and it goes down to the very bottom of those two tubes, and then it comes back up, and the concrete fills all the way back up on the outside of those casings. So you're essentially creating like a concrete sleeve around the tube. And just the engineering and what it takes to do that, and the pressure, and just whoever thought of doing that is just like, it's just kind of crazy that's how and they keep doing that and doing that and doing that. They create these little concrete sleeves until, I guess, they strike oil.
Exactly. Well, that's my next line is, at this point, I assume you hit oil. So again, check out our episode on natural gas and oil to figure out what they do with it from there. It's not like you just pump out oil and it like is magically perfect for use, right? There's still a whole bunch of process that goes into refining this to make it usable for the different purposes that we need.
What did Jed Clampett call it? Texas teas?
Texas tea, yeah.
Was it tea or teas? Texas
I don't
tea?
know. I don't know. I think so.
I remember I
that was before my time.
The Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah. Good times. Okay, so moving on, Luke. What do you have next to talk about?
So I want to talk about, just now that we've gone through a little bit of the history, some of the number or how it works. I want to talk about like the numbers, like when you think of like all the different things that go into like why we do these things. So the first thing is you have to understand, and I never knew this, that there's only about 5 states that actually can claim in the United States. This is just oil production. So the top 5 oil producing states. So this includes places.
This isn't a game?
No, this is not a game. Well, actually, we can make it a game. We'll make it a game, James. So what's the number 1 state?
Texas.
Yep, by far. So 43.
Can I just guess the 40? Go ahead.
43% of all of the oil U.S. production is done in Texas. The crazy thing is that doesn't include the Gulf of Mexico and the federal offshore stuff. So this is that 9-mile area that Texas gets and Florida gets, and then there's a whole Gulf of Mexico federal offshore area
that's just as well. Its own thing.
Yeah. So how many barrels would you say Texas produces? So this includes the land and so it produces 4.8, I'm guessing that's billion. Yeah. Billion barrels, in 2020.
A year. Wow.
A year. So the Gulf of Mexico, so this is that federal area, they produce 1.6 billion barrels. It's kind of crazy. So the top 5 countries, and again, I didn't know this.
Russia
United States
has to be on there.
United States is number 1. We're at 15%.
Yeah, America.
Russia is 13%. Saudi Arabia is 12%. Iraq is number 6, and Canada is 4. So a lot of these are not offshore oil drilling things, obviously.
They make a lot of oil.
Exactly. And next question for you. We will make this. So name at least 2 countries who are in OPEC.
OPEC.
Yeah. So OPEC is the Organization of the Petroleum Export Countries. So these are all, in case you didn't know what it was.
Is America in that? No. How about Kuwait?
You got Kuwait. Yep.
And how about, I'll steal Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, they're both in there. Yeah. It's Algeria, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Venezuela.
Venezuela. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Good stuff. Luke, before we go on any further, could we take a break for this week's Luke's rant?
Oh, and this rant is timely, James. So it is the 14th. And what month is it, James?
May, I believe.
It's the 14th of May, 2021, depending on when you're listening to this. And every picture I'm seeing on Twitter and Facebook is people hoarding gasoline. And it is so incredibly frustrating. Like, this is literally like a duplication of toilet paper a year ago. Do you remember whenever the pandemic started and you couldn't find toilet paper and it was just like people were hoarding it? And folks, come on. There was an attack on our oil line.
Was shut down for like a few days.
It was a couple of days. It's like there's oil, there's gas in the trucks that are being delivered. Even if there's a disruption, you all work at home. No one's going into the office. Where do you got to be? I mean, it's bananas. So it's just So the price of gas is driving me crazy because you and I both drive trucks. So the price of gas. But I don't drive that much. I fill my tank up and I'm good for like 2 weeks because I'm staying at home, so it doesn't affect me too much. But so I'm hoping we post this one relatively soon, James. But don't be a moron. You don't need to like put all kinds of containers in the back of your car. It's, first of all, you should not put gas in the back of your car, period. If you don't have like a truck bed, you shouldn't probably be putting gas in your vehicle. Just saying.
Seems like sound advice.
Yeah, so just stop being morons, people. Gas will always be there. It might get more expensive, might get less expensive, but There's no reason in hoarding gasoline. I mean, really, it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Now, myself, I do have big tankers full of gasoline in the back of my truck that I just carry around for good measure. And I usually throw my half-finished cigarettes into the back out the window just to see how it goes.
We joke, kids. We joke. James doesn't
Smoking
smoke.
Is bad. That's
It's
right.
Terrible.
It is really bad for you. Luke, the next thing I have is life on an oil rig, but do you have more that you wanted to cover?
Do you want to finish with disasters?
Oh, of course I do.
Okay, we will. I'll save my disasters until the end.
Okay. So life on an oil rig, Luke. So first off, cargo ships are a big part of this process. They're used to help with supplies, which makes sense. Again, this is like a city floating out there, but it turns out you can't really have a farm growing you food or anything. So they ship supplies back and forth, both to help the people as well as the supplies that might be needed for the rig itself. Now in the North Sea, as well as most other, offshore fields, this is like these ships are sent back and forth, but most of the oil comes back in a big old pipe.
Yep.
So it's not like they're filling up oil tankers out in the ocean and sending them back here. But that doesn't mean people don't have to eat. So this is what these ships are used for. Even though all these ships are going back and forth, they aren't really doing a whole lot with the actual oil. Repairs for go ahead.
About the North Sea.
Oh yeah.
So there's like this little regional airport in Scotland, and it only flies to like one or two places, but it is the number one heliport in the world, because I forget the name of the company, but they literally have like 200 helicopters that fly hundreds of trips a day all over the North Sea.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's people. It's not usually stuff. It's getting workers on and off the ships, medical emergencies. Usually they work for 2 or 3 weeks and then they're off for like 2 or 3 weeks and they go back for 2 or 3 weeks. So there's a whole helicopter transportation industry just for these oil rigs.
So it's in Aberdeen, Scotland, and they like make fun of this airport because it's this tiny regional airport. It flies to a few areas, except it's the busiest heliport that we have in the world because of all of the trips that it's making. So just like you were saying, people are working 12-hour days, 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Then they come back for vacation, or at least not working for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And this is good to reduce the number of people that they need to support on one of the rigs, as well as, to keep safety measures in place. There's less people, less room for disaster, things like that. Less room for accommodations are needed. It really feels like if you've been on a submarine or a kind of boat like that, it has that kind of vibe.
All the pictures look like that.
Yeah, it does mean there's lots of shuttling back and forth, like you said, generally done by helicopter. Fun fact for you, oil rigs are one, if not the number one industrial use for helicopters in the world.
Yeah,
like this is the biggest thing that helicopters do, is shuttle people back and forth from here. And then you mentioned there's the company that does that. But when you're on the rig, there's basically 3 jobs that you're going to do. One would be production. So these are the people who are actually involved with the extracting process of oil.
I'm not strong enough to do that.
Certainly not me. Maintenance. So obviously those who are keeping care of the rig and the equipment, all that. And then the service people. So these are the ones. That's exactly you, because these are the people cooking, cleaning, taking care of the crew.
Could you imagine me making my famous pulled pork sandwiches for the crew of an oil rig?
Goodness. And you know why you might want to do that, Luke? Because fun fact, the average offshore salary, especially in the UK, is between 60 and 70,000 pounds.
Some money.
They make like double the national average in wages. And it also means that they make about double what their onshore people would make. So all of the like management and those folks, they never get to go out to the rig. They have to stay back on the on-land office, so they don't get paid as much. A couple more fun facts for you. The world makes about 20 million barrels of oil each day from offshore sources. Most of it is in the shallow water, some's in the deep. Way more if you look at it like overall oil production each day. Not so fun fact, if you remember that big BP oil spill in the Gulf,
I think it was my disaster.
Oh, I won't talk about it then. Slightly more fun fact, since offshore rigs are really high risk, really low reward, especially at this point, that's not really a great plan, right? That's not a good way to make money. And since people hate them screwing up the environment, there have been little to no expansion over the past 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
So, if you hate this whole idea, there's that.
So
So
a couple
let's hear
fun
the
facts,
disaster.
a couple
Yeah.
fun facts that I have.
Okay.
So nearly all offshore oil production globally occurs in the Gulf of Mexico. There's thousands of platforms in operation. And there are a few of them. I think there was like 15 or 20 maybe that actually operate at 10,000 feet of water or more. I think the deepest one was somewhere around 12,000 feet. Another fun fact, in 2019, offshore oil and gas production for the federal Gulf of Mexico accounted for 15% of the total U.S. crude oil production, and about 3% of the natural gas production. And the tallest structure in the world is Patronus, the thing that Harry Potter cast. It was.
What's his?
It's a
what's
deer.
His is a deer,
like
right?
That. So, it was. I don't know how you say it. It looks like Patronus. Petronius. Obviously, 2,000 feet tall total because it went all the way down to the seafloor.
Well, I was gonna say 2,000 feet tall, but it's more like 2,000 feet down.
Yeah.
Deep? Okay.
Cost $500 million to build back in the day because this is an older structure, and it was only surpassed recently by that tower in
the
Kuwait.
Burj Khalifa.
So the second tallest man-made structure in the world is actually in the water.
Isn't that crazy?
Bananas.
And so, like, don't be confused when he says it's the second tallest, but he also threw out that there's some that are 10 or 12,000 feet deep. I mean, not all of them are built with a connecting structure like he's talking about. So this is literally like, think of like almost like scaffolding or something holding up this platform. So very interesting. And the 500 million, Luke, that's like not even a lot. I mean, obviously it is, but some of these cost over $1 billion to put up there.
So James, we have to talk about it's not the biggest technically, but it's probably the most televised, most popular.
Yeah, for sure.
So the BP Deepwater Horizon explosion happened on April 20th, 2010. James was a wee lad when this happened. And it was the biggest oil spill in the United States history by far. It killed 11 workers and spewed somewhere to the neighborhood of 4.9 billion with a B barrels of oil. It's kind of crazy. No, I'm sorry, million. 4.9 million. I said billion. 4.9 million.
At that point.
It's terrible regardless. 4.9 million barrels of oil leaked into the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, my goodness.
Do you remember when this was all like, it was all the news? Like they literally had cameras on the seafloor. And what they did was, so what was happening was, so this thing exploded, blah, 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 blah. That pressure relief valve thing, whatever we called it, failed. And oil was just gushing out of the well at the bottom of the ocean. I remember seeing the pictures of it just spewing. And all the safety mechanisms to shut it off failed. And what they had to do was they kept on trying to pump mud down into it to clog it up. And what they ended up doing was they drilled these auxiliary wells that came in at like a slight angle and intersected the main well, going vertically, the oil coming out. And what they did was they basically did what's called a bottom kill maneuver. And what they do is they basically just blew a ton of concrete into the primary well core or column from this side angle one. And they pressure tested it a couple days later, and it was completely and totally sealed. But this went from April 20th to September 17th, to April, May, June, July, August, September. So for 5 months, roughly, this thing was spewing oil. It cost BP $65 billion to clean up. And there's
clean up and settle lawsuits and stuff like that.
I mean, it was crazy. And I remember all the pictures of the little ducks and turtles and fish all covered in oil. And the economy down there suffered. They stopped oil drilling for a while, and fishing was put on hold. And it was a huge disaster.
It really was.
You remember that?
I do. I mean, that was only 11 years ago, right?
So you were
I was
9.
9. Yeah. Oh goodness. I like that you went into all of the facts about it, because the only thing I had was how much BP spent to clean up their mistake. So you can see where my priorities are.
So another disaster, and I'm not going to go into detail, but so only 11 people died on this one, which is terrible. Terrible if you were one of those 11 people or their families. But there was one in the UK, the North Sea, where like 129 people died. So like literally the entire crew died either through drowning, fire, explosion, whatever it was. So from a human factor, this was actually small, and that's probably a lot of the safety things that they do and precautions that they take. But there were ones where lots and lots of people died, unfortunately.
Well, on that cheery note, Luke, I think we should call it a day. What do you say?
I think we should.
All right. Hopefully you all learned something about offshore oil drilling rigs, the jobs that you might want, and how Luke could go cook for everyone. If you have any questions, if you want to suggest any other topics, if you just want to say hi and tell us what a great job we're doing, why don't you email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com. And until next time,
see ya.